Welcome Strategy Battle Gamers to another GBHL YouTube channel video with your GBHL channel host GBHL James, bringing you another hobby vlog because I am smashing the hobbying at the moment. Very pleased. This doing these little bits of commission work has really worked out for me on a personal level, because in between doing skin on Rivendell Knights, I'm doing skin on Axemen of Lossarnach. In between doing armour on them, I'm doing armour on other bits and pieces. When between doing horses on them, I've been doing Rohirrim repaint horses. And in front of you, you can see those Axemen of Lossarnach and Forlong the Fat, which I've started. Really love these models. I got them ages ago, like absolutely ages ago, with the intention of having a big Fiefdoms army. I really love the models. I absolutely love the Axemen of Lossarnach, and I actually think it's a pretty decent-ish profile as well, actually. Yep, defense 5, but the fact that they can spear support and the fight 4 is pretty good, and it's also the fact that you've got Forlong leading them, who does quite a lot for his points. Actually, he's pretty cheap for what he brings. Yes, he's only fight 4, but I think being able to have a cheap hero enables you, of course, to bring more troops, which I really like. So I thought I'd get these down in front of you. I have currently obviously given them the primer of black. And then whilst I was doing the Rivendell Knight faces, I've also painted some skin on these guys, and I've also washed the skin. And whilst I was doing the Rivendell Knight boots, I've also, because it's the same colour, Doomball Brown, I've also done some Doomball Brown on the gloves. Now what's going to be quite interesting here is what kind of scheme I'm going to go for. Now the Axemen of Lossarnach, of course, most of them is chainmail and armour, which is going to make them pretty easy and quick to paint, to be honest, but there is a little bit of cloth on there. I'd be very tempted, very tempted to go down and do my favourite colour to paint, which is of course red. But I have a lot of stuff that's red. I've got a lot of Rohirrim that's red, with the red and greens and the like, and of course the Rivendell Knights, I use the red a lot. So actually I think I'm going to go for a bit of a change here and go for some whites and blues, with these guys, and see how that turns out, because they are, of course, after all, Fiefdom troops, and they are going to probably be fighting alongside some of those Knights of Dol Amroth and Prince Imrahil, who I've also primed up. Bit of a conversion for the lance there, because the one that JT of Awkward Battle sold me for some reason didn't have the lance arm, so I just used that instead. I've also primed up the guy on foot, and I'm going to continue painting these guys the skin and the armour now, so I'll come back after I've done that so you can see some progress. A little bit of progress with the Axemen of Lossarnach. As you can see, I have dry brushed their chainmail using lead belcher, which is pretty much always the base colour of metal that I use when I'm doing armour. It is a bit of a darker, sort of more dulled metal, but it just gives you that room to do a little bit of a highlight from, and it also means that they don't look too bright. I will be going over them with a little bit of Nuln oil now, just into the bits of chainmail which are closest to the recesses, and then I'll be getting out some of Ironbreaker and going over probably about 3/4 of the more kind of raised areas of the chainmail before getting the Runefang steel out right on the very edges. Now one thing that I'm not too sure about is whether to go with the kind of the traditional Axemen of Lossarnach thing of doing the kind of metal cuirass with the greaves, or whether to actually go for a leather, because they've already got quite a lot of armour already on them. It does mean, of course, that they're easier to paint. They're a bit easier to paint when you're doing all of the metal, but I just wonder whether using some brown leather will mix up. So I guess you'll see in the next clip of this hobby vlog whether what kind of decision I've made, whether to go for the metal armour or whether to go for leather. So I'll be back when I've made that decision. Here we go with a little bit more progress with our Axemen of Lossarnach. So since you last saw this video, I have finished the armour as far as I'm concerned. I've also finished the skin to a degree. Some of them I might just touch up where I did their eyes, and maybe where the whites of their eyes sort of ran out a little bit. And some of them I might put a bit of Reichland flesh shade back on in certain parts, just to get a bit of a smoother transition between some of the blends. And I've made a start on painting things like the leather straps. I'd obviously made a start with their gloves previously, but I made a start with their boots, their gloves, leather straps, and I'll also be making a start with their spear shafts as well. But their armour and their faces and eyes are pretty much done. So let's have a little bit of a gander and a look, and you guys can let me know what you think. So here we go. Let's get this guy focused in. So with the armour, I actually went sort of a step further than I might normally do when doing armour. I started off with lead belcher, and then I just dry brushed the lead belcher over the black primer. I then actually got some Nuln oil. Instead of washing the whole thing, I just washed the recesses. So I just did the recesses. There's another guy. At which point I then, after I'd washed those recesses and just sort of the little folds and the bits in between, sort of the edge of the armour where the armour makes contact with other areas of the model, I then got some Ironbreaker, which is a bit of a brighter silver again. And what I did with that was just a dry brush, not all the way up over the lead belcher, but just over most of the kind of raised areas. Basically, I've been doing this armour sort of in a similar kind of way that I sort of do my highlights on other colours. You know, starting off with a base colour, inking. Instead of using that base colour again, no, I didn't need to, because where the ink was, I kind of left it, and then left that kind of gap between the inked area and the Ironbreaker area, so that then you had a transition through the base lead belcher itself. And then I got some Runefang steel, which is a real kind of bright silver, and just did the very edges of all of the silver areas, just the very, 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 very edges. There we go. And that was that for them, and I'm pretty happy with how it's turned out. I think it will pop a lot more, obviously, when you don't have all of these kind of black areas, but when the whole miniature's done, I think that that's going to look pretty sweet, I have to say. And then I painted the skin and the eyes. So I know lots of people like doing sort of different types. I've got different types of kind of skin tone. I've got a way that I like to do it myself, and I like to use a really kind of dark dwarven flesh to start off with. Now, I know that if you watch some of the Warhammer TV painting videos, there we go, look at this guy here. If you look at some of the Warhammer TV painting videos, they tend to start off with Bugman's Glow, which is like a different kind of colour, and a bit of a darker, more kind of almost brown, like a pinky brown. Whereas Dwarven Flesh is a bit of a warmer colour. I think it's got more kind of an oranginess to it almost. It actually looks orange when you look at it on the outside. And they tend to highlight up, especially kind of man characters, using Cadian Flesh Tone, which I have actually bought, and it's a bit more of a pinky colour, Cadian Flesh Tone, but I like working with Dwarven Flesh first and building up from there. So what I tend to do, depending on the type of model, but I will do a Dwarven Flesh, and I will wash with Agrax Earthshade. It's actually a real kind of dark wash normally, not always. Sometimes I'll do Reikland Flesh Shade. It depends what I'm going for and the detail on the characters themselves, and how much of the character is exposed. And then I will take the Dwarven Flesh again, and I will go over, apart from sort of the biggest kind of recesses, and then I will actually mix a very light flesh called Ungor Flesh with the Dwarven Flesh for the next highlight, and then almost sort of purely Ungor Flesh I will then do that just around the brow and the nose and the top of the cheeks and the like, and then finally with a Sharpie bone I'll just put a little sort of drop at the tips of the noses, tips of the cheekbones, and sort of where the brow connects as well, to sort of really draw you in to the kind of eyes area. So let's give you a bit of an example here. There we go. And it gives what I think is a quite nice effect on the skin. I mean, I painted Boar for Gilball, who's a big kind of board flesh-based model, and I kind of forgot what I did with him, because I was really pleased with how he came out. The model's a bit more cartoony, so the contrast between the highlighted flesh and the crevices is much more stark, but it works really well, whereas this is a bit more of a subtle blend. But because these guys have got shiny bald heads, I kind of had to carry on the kind of lighter Ungor flesh highlight, instead of just being on the tip of his brow, but also being kind of on the top of his head as well. But pretty pleased how they've turned out. And then of course we've got the eyes, which you will have been noticing. Knocking over my toys. We've got the eyes as well. And eyes, if you're patient, are relatively easy to do. It does require you to be very patient though, so for anybody out there who's like, oh god, I really struggle with eyes, listen carefully, for I shall say this only once. So with eyes, what's really important is that you have to remember that when you have paint on your brush, particularly if you're not using a medium, even with water, that paint starts to dry on your brush pretty quickly, and that means that it will kind of draw away from the tip of the brush. And to paint any kind of sort of very small detail such as the eyes on this guy, you need there to be paint on the tip of the brush. So using medium is pretty handy. However, when you're doing eyes, you don't want a runny watery paint, because then it will run and spill into the darker sockets around it, instead of just making one eyeball, as it were. So as you can see with this guy here, so you end up in a bit of a conundrum, but the trick to do is you've just got to constantly clean your brush, and you've got to act reasonably quickly, but still in a kind of neat way. So what I tend to do is I leave the paint pot open. I'll get some medium, a little bit of medium on the brush, but kind of dry it off. You don't want it to be runny. And then I will get the tiniest little bit of paint, like a little dot, on the end tip of my brush, and then I'll wipe the excess, not too much, but I'll wipe a little bit of the excess onto the edge of the paint pot, and then I'll take the point of the brush and let a little bit of paint settle on the inside corner of the eye. And when it's done that, I will very slowly drag that tip carefully along, just to create that little kind of slant. And that's that. So the key thing, and then I will have to wash my brush again, because that paint will dry, so don't try and do the next eye with it. You immediately wash your brush, you do the same thing again for the second eye, because if you use the same brush, that paint will have moved further up the brush, which means that you've then got to sort of get the brush slightly sideways, which means that you're not using the finest tip, and it's more likely to go everywhere. But the main trick is, one, cleaning your brush in between every single eye, I find important. Two, make sure your paint isn't too runny, but do remember that medium can help stopping that paint sort of drying up on the brush too quickly. You know, that's probably my next tip. And then with the black, it's exactly the same. I'll take a little bit of black, so I've got Forlong here. I'll open up the paint pot, I'll make sure that my brush has got a little bit of medium on it, but it's not sort of saturated, it's not a wet brush, so to speak. It's just got a little bit of medium in it, just stop everything from drying too quickly. I'll get a tiny little dot on it. I will take the tip of the brush slightly towards the nose, but the upper part of the eye, and I'll sort of get the dot that I want first, and then I'll slowly apply very, very gently, a little bit more pressure, slightly dragging down like so. So you still end up with the white bit kind of underneath, and that's that. And that's how I do eyes. That's how I do my eyes. So I'm pretty pleased with how these guys are coming out so far. As you can see, spear shafts, I'll be doing exactly the same as I do spear shafts and shields and everything with everybody else. So give you an example, Ale the Young here, who you will have seen on my showcase. But the kind of wood effect you can see on the back of the shield and on his spear shaft, Smallfang Brown with wash of Aquax Earthshade with the Steel Legion drab lines kind of squiggled down it, and then a very watered down Agwax brush again. And I'm going to be doing that on all their spear shafts next, after I've painted their boots and the leather and everything, and then that will leave the fun job of doing the cloth. You know, really looking forward to doing the cloth on these guys. What I'm thinking is to go for sort of a white cloth for the kind of satchel parts of them. They're going around like that, and then any of the kind of material underneath going for like a blue, so really tying them in with Dol Amroth. So let me know what you think about that as a scheme. And then with Forlong, I mean, I'm not too sure. I think that there's a little bit of me that wants to actually, with Forlong, because he's the kind of leader of the warband, is to actually go for the blue sash and go for a white cloak on the inside, and then have sort of a light grey on the inside of the cloak, and a white cloak on the outside. Maybe a little bit of freehand on there as well. That's what I'm thinking. But let me know, what do you think? Do you think that should be the scheme that I go for? I think that's what I'm probably going to do. Or I could do the blue cloak and the white sash, and then they've all got white sashes kind of across the board, really. But I've enjoyed sort of painting these guys up in between doing some of the commission work for Adam Marcel. Adam Marcel is having some Mountie themed Rivendell Knights, which I am making progress with. I don't really want to show off too much. I want him to see them when they're fully finished, but if I just come in there, they're going to have red cloaks, and they're going to have dark blue pants with a yellow stripe. And the horses look pretty cool as well. So just a few little things that tie them in with the Canadian Mounties, and they're going to have these nice snowy bases as well. So for example, for the Rivendell Knight Captain, the Mountie Captain, I've done a nice base for him there. You know, just got him on a nice bit of slate there, which should be pretty cool. I'm looking forward to just keep on plugging away with that commission. I want them to be really nice for him. It's my first ever commission that I've ever done, so I'm looking forward to getting them done by the new year. And then I have another commission, some Rohan work. People have been asking, like, you know, how are you going to get your own projects done? I've done more of my own projects. No, hopefully this doesn't annoy the people who obviously got me for the commission, but I've managed to get more of my own projects done since doing these commissions, because just sitting down and painting the models, I mean, painting 6 Rivendell Knights, I painted lots of Rivendell Knights, it can get a little bit sort of monotonous. So what you find yourself doing is, when you paint a colour on those Rivendell Knights, so for example the gloves on the Axemen of Lossarnach is the same colour as the boots on the Rivendell Knights, and the red on the cloaks of his Rivendell Knights is the same red that I've then put on things like the Outriders, when I was painting the Outriders, and the edges of the shield during my Rohan repaint. Just as a little bit of an example there. So that's kind of the way that I've been going. When I was painting the because his Rivendell Knights have got, again, I don't want to give too much away, let's just, I don't want it to focus, but as you can see there, they've got like a brassy kind of colour, because the Canadian Mounties have got brass on them. So when I was painting that kind of brass colour, I much prefer the brass colour effect on the Rohirrim as well. So again, there's nice little transitions over there. So yeah, I am looking forward to getting these guys done. Same with the skin. When I've been painting the skin of the Rivendell Knight guys, I've been painting the skin on these, the eyes and the like as well. So yeah, it's been really good to be able to get some of my own stuff done. I've had these for absolutely ages. To give you an idea, I mean, it was one of the first things I ordered from Slayer Gaming before it went under. Way before it kind of went under. I had to wait for these guys for an absolute age. I think it took about 3 months, I think, before I actually received my order from them, and they actually chucked in a free lot of Axemen of Lossarnach, which I think was really nice, you know, to make up for the fact that it took so long. But yeah, so that's how long I've been waiting for these guys to be done, and I think I might have got them originally just in case for Middle-earth's Deadliest Warband alike. But I also do love the miniatures. I've really enjoyed them to paint, particularly, I have to say, initially, these guys. I just think the character of the bald guys, the pose is so cool, the weapon is cool. I mean, that's a cool pose, and he's cool, isn't he? Look at that. He looks the business. But since painting them, I've also really enjoyed little subtleties in the detail on the faces of these ones, which I didn't like the pose as much, but you can see they've really got some expression going on, which I'm a big fan of. I think they look cool. So yeah, that's my progress with the Axemen of Lossarnach so far. I will hopefully be able to give them a little bit of maybe a warband showcase rather than bring them up in my next hobby vlog. Hopefully I'll be working on something else by then. But I hope you enjoyed seeing their progress and hearing about how I took on some of the various techniques that you can see on them and that I'm having to deal with the Rivendell Knights. So guys, don't forget to comment, like, share and subscribe. Support your Hobbit host by checking the links in the video description below. Remember, when you support Hotgates Gaming, you're not just supporting my content that I've been trying to get out over there, but also my content here as well. Make sure that you like our Facebook page and you follow us on Twitter, that you support your Hobbit hobby, and as ever team, happy strategy battle gaming.